when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, maybe take a step back. When it comes to brain health, I think there are a handful of things that seem unequivocally true. And there's a lot of stuff that is signal to noise ratio that's really low. So the unequivocally true things for brain health are sleep matters. Another unequivocally true thing for brain health is that lower LDL cholesterol and ApoB is better than higher. Another thing that is unequivocally true is not having type 2 diabetes matters.
So having really
being
insulin sensitive,
being
not
insulin
insensitive.
sensitive matters. Sleeping adequately matters. Having lower lipids matters. Those three things are clear, and the fourth one that is unequivocally clear is exercise matters.
More specific form of exercise?
So I tried to answer this question on a recent AMA that I did, because the answer is more is always better. But I tried to have one of our analysts look at it through the lens of, if you could only exercise 3 hours a week, what would be the highest use case? And our interpretation of the literature was, if you could only spend 3 hours a week exercising, you'd be best off doing 1 hour of low intensity cardio, 1 hour of strength, and 1 hour of interval training. So if someone said, like, I only want the minimum effective dose, you're going to get a pretty good bang for your buck doing that. But I would argue, if your brain really matters to you, do more.
1 hour of interval training is no joke.
No, because you're going to spread that out over probably at least 2 workouts. Yeah. But Andrew, those 4 things are basically the only thing where there's no ambiguity about the benefit.
What about head hits? Like, don't hit your head.
Seems almost assuredly true in a susceptible individual, for sure. So I put that. Yeah, maybe we could include that as well.
Well, I just mentioned, one of the things I've been learning recently is, I know you boxed for a number of years when you were younger. I boxed a little bit, hit my head a number of times skateboarding. But, we think about sport injuries as the major cause of head injuries. But then I've got colleagues at Stanford that say car accidents, bike accidents.
Oh.
I've got so many colleagues and children of colleagues growing up in and around campus that were hit by cars on Woodside Road, or, mere small objects surrounded by, what's the car weigh, 3,000 pounds or something like that?
More.
It's unbelievable the number of head injuries, and then construction sites, because those ridiculous little hard hats, which don't protect against anything except, maybe windblown hair, that they basically predispose, the whole situation predispose people to head injuries. Very common on construction sites, and then saying nothing of military, et cetera. So I think that I was told that the best thing to do if you get a head injury is to not get another one. In other words, if you can, stop doing the activity that leads to more head injury.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is emerging, and I hope it is studied rigorously, is the use of hyperbaric oxygen immediately following a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. I reached out to Dom D'Agostino a little while ago to because he knows a lot about this lit, to say, hey, is there anything out there that's really kind of turnkey convincing? And he said, not yet. They're still doing it, right? So I would do this. Like, if I was in a car accident tomorrow and sustained a concussion, and by the way, I'm not a proponent of hyperbaric oxygen. So we have an internal white paper that we wrote inside quite recently, where I examined, when I say I examined, the analyst team examined, and I pushed back and reviewed. And I came away very kind of bearish on hyperbaric oxygen. I don't think it's harmful, but I think all of the claims are nonsense. Telomere extension is totally irrelevant. And if you actually look at the studies, they're the worst done studies I've ever seen in my life. I'm sure you've seen some of these where it's like, you put these people in a hyperbaric chamber and then watch them do cognitive tasks after, and they're so much better. Well, the fine print is they don't even have placebo groups here. Like, can you imagine doing a study without a placebo group? Or your placebo group doesn't go into a sham chamber?
Yeah, one of the big problems of the proliferation of all these pay-to-play journals, meaning journals that will basically publish a paper with minimal or poor peer review because they charge in order to publish, and then offer free access. Free access sounds great, but when it's pay-to-play type journals, there's been a huge proliferation of papers, most of which you find on Twitter, in which the study design is beyond bad.
Comical.
Like a ninth grader who woke up late for school and was partying all weekend could design a better study than most of these studies.
Yeah,
there's some excellent studies out there as well, of course, presumably and eventually on hyperbaric chamber too. So I'm not picking on hyperbaric chamber per se, but the proliferation of truly terrible science that's published in peer-reviewed journals is just overwhelming.
Yeah, it's insane. And all of that is to say, I think there are places where hyperbaric oxygen makes sense. Clearly in wound healing, it does. It's a miracle treatment for wound healing. And I would absolutely use hyperbaric oxygen if I suffered a concussion. But beyond that, I think it's pretty tough to make the case.
Where do people go for that? I mean, there are clinics.
Yeah, there are clinics you basically go to.
And the protocols have to be very precise. Right? I mean, this isn't something to cowboy at home.
No. You have to go into a real chamber. I think the TBI protocol that's most commonly used is, God, I want to say it's pretty intense. It's like 5 60-minute sessions a week at 2 atmospheres.
Oh boy.
Like it's no joke.
Okay.
So from a cost and time perspective, it's enormous. And the time and cost are reasons why I think when I see people doing hyperbaric oxygen just because they think it's going to help them live longer, I'm like, dude, you know what you could do with 5 hours a week plus the commuting time that you put into that? Like, it's put that into exercise, and I promise you'll get a bigger benefit than you're getting out of hyperbaric oxygen. But there's a lot of other stuff that I just think is maybe helpful. There's tons of supplements that I think about when it comes to brain health. What about theracumin? What about magnesium with L-threonate, the transporter? What about methylated vitamins that lower homocysteine? What about EPA and DHA? And we've gone through all of the literature on that stuff. And many of these things we still are recommending through a kind of basically like the potential benefits outweigh the potential costs. But the evidence is really unimpressive for most of those other interventions. So when you think about the big 4 or big 5, if you include not getting head injury, everything else is probably a rounding error compared to those big ones.
Maybe just for sake of thoroughness, we could just list off those 4 again. Exercise,
sleep, insulin sensitivity, and lipid management.